Hello students, I hope you all are well. So let us continue with our lesson. The topic for today is the Reign of Terror 1793 to 1794. So you know the meaning of terror, right? It means fear. So the period from 1793 to 94 in France is referred to as the Reign of Terror, the period of terror, fear. Next, Robespierre followed a policy of severe control and punishment. Now, who was Robespierre? Maximilien Robespierre. He was the leader of the Jacobin Club. The enemies of Republic, that means those who were opposed to Republic, okay, like ex-nobles and clergy, members of other political parties, even members of his own party, own Jacobin party, who did not agree with his methods, okay, who did not agree with his methods or terms. All these enemies were arrested, they were imprisoned, okay, imprisoned means they were put behind the bars, they were sent to jail and then tried by a revolutionary tribunal. Now, revolutionary tribunal means a revolutionary committee or a revolutionary board, okay? And if the court found them guilty, okay, then they were guillotined. Okay, now what is guillotine? Guillotine is a device, a machine that has two poles and a blade with which a person was beheaded. Beheaded means to cut off the head. This machine was named after Dr. Guillotin, who invented it. Next, let us learn about the measures or steps taken by Maximilien Robespierre. Number 1, Robespierre's government issued laws placing a maximum ceiling on wages and prices. It means there were certain laws made by the government which keeps a check on the wages and the prices of goods. Point number 2, meat and bread were rationed. Rationed means to limit the food. That means people were allowed to buy only limited amount of meat and bread. Point number 3, peasants were forced to transport their grain to the cities and sell it at the prices fixed by the government. That means peasants had to sell their food grains at the prices fixed by the government. Point number 4, the use of more expensive white flour was forbidden. Flour means maida. Forbidden means not allowed. That means the white flour, which was very expensive, people were not allowed to use it. All citizens were required to eat the pain de galette, equality bread, a loaf made of whole wheat. That means all citizens were required to eat the bread that was made of whole wheat. Next, equality was also sought to be practiced through forms of speech and address. Instead of the traditional monsieur, like sir, and madame, madam, all French men and women were henceforth citoyen and citoyenne, citizen. That means people were not allowed to use terms like monsieur or madame, and from now onwards all French men and women are citizens. Next, churches were shut down and their buildings converted into barracks or offices. So all these churches were confiscated, okay, and these churches were converted into barracks or offices. So these were the steps taken by Maximilien Robespierre to bring equality in France. Since Robespierre was very strict and his policies were very harsh, even his supporters started turning against him. Later, the court found him guilty in July 1794, and then the next day he was arrested and he was sent to guillotine. Okay, our next topic is a directory rules France. After the fall of the Jacobin government, the wealthier middle classes, they seized power. the new constitution, they did not allow non-propertied men to vote. Once again, the people who had no property, who were not rich, were not allowed to vote. It provided for 2 elected legislative councils. These then appointed a directory and executive made up of 5 members. So now there were 2 groups. One was legislative council and another one was directory. So what is directory? An executive made up of 5 members. This was done because during the Jacobin government, the power was concentrated on one man, one leader like Maximilian Robespierre. And in order to avoid that, now there were 5 members, 5 executive members. But the directors often had clashed with the legislative council, who then sought to dismiss them. So I told you that on one hand there was this legislative council, and on the other hand there was this directors. So the problem was directors and legislative council, they often had quarrel, clashes between them. The political instability of the directory paved the way for the rise of a military dictator, Napoleon Bonaparte. So there was political instability in France. Political instability means the political system was unstable, weak. And that led to the rise of military dictator Napoleon Bonaparte. Our last topic for today is, did women have a revolution? So from the very beginning, women were active participants in every events. Whatever events happened in France, women took active part in all of those events. Women thought that their involvement in these events would improve their lives. Most women of the third estate worked as seamstresses or laundresses, as you can see in the picture. They also sold flowers, fruits, vegetables at the market. Some of them were employed as domestic servants, helper in the houses of rich people. Most women did not have any access to education. They didn't go to school, or they did not get any job trainings. Only the daughters of nobles or wealthier, rich members of the third estate could study at a convent, after which their families arranged a marriage for them. Even working women, they had to look after their families, like cooking, fetching water, queuing up for bread, and looking after the children. Their wages were also lower than those of men. So in order to discuss and voice their interest, women started their own political clubs and newspapers. Around 60 women clubs came up in different French societies. The Society of Revolutionary and Republican Women was the most famous of them. Among 60 women clubs, the most famous women's club was the Society of Revolutionary and Republican Women. One of the main demands was that women enjoy same political right as men. But when the new constitution for France was written in 1791, women were very disappointed. They were very sad because they were termed as passive citizens, and they were not allowed to vote. So now the main demand was the right to vote, to be elected in the assembly, and to hold political office. Later, the revolutionary government, they introduced some laws that helped to improve the lives of women. Some of the steps taken by the revolutionary government to improve the lives of women were, they created state schools, and schooling was now made compulsory for girls, all girls. Their fathers could no longer force them into marriage against their will. Marriage was also registered under civil law. Divorce was made legal. Now both men and women could apply for divorce. So women could now train for jobs and could become artists or run small businesses. During the Reign of Terror, or under the Jacobin government, they issued laws ordering closure of women's club and banning their political rights. Women were forced to close all their women's club, and some of the leaders were arrested, and number of them were executed also, killed also. Women's movement for voting rights and equal wages, it continued for next 200 years in many countries of the world. It was finally in 1946 that women in France won the right to vote. She is Olympe de Gouges. She is one of the most important politically active women in revolutionary France. In 1791, she wrote a Declaration of Rights of Women and Citizen. So this much for today. We will continue it in the next class.